Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our board meeting on Monday, September 21st. May I have a roll call, Mr. Mahmood?
Surely. Mr. Gillette?
Here.
Mrs. Haas? I know you're here, Mrs. Haas. Dr. Harris? Thank you. Mrs. Maroon?
Here.
Mr. Oliver? Mr. Pulsifer?
Here.
Mrs. Stats?
Here.
Mr. Eo?
Here.
And Dr. Susan?
Here.
We have a quorum.
In accordance with the State Sunshine Law of New Jersey, adequate notice of this meeting of the Hillsborough Township Board of Ed was provided on September 17th to the Hillsborough Beacon and the Courier News. I'd now like to make a motion to move into executive session. Whereas the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231 of the Laws of 1975 provides that a public body may exclude the public from that portion of a meeting of which the public body discusses certain matters for which confidentiality is required as permitted in Section 7B of the Act, resolved by the Board of Education of the Township of Hillsborough in the County of Somerset in the State of New Jersey as follows. The matters to be discussed are the superintendent's evaluation and a grievance filed by the Hillsborough Educational Association. The matters to be discussed in executive session shall be disclosed to the public when the need for confidentiality no longer exists. May I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Maroon. Second. Thank you, Dr. Harris. We will move into executive session and return at 7:30. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. We're back from executive session. May I have a roll call, please, Mr. Mahmood?
Surely. Mr. Gillette?
Here.
Thank you, Mrs. Haas.
Here.
Thank you. Dr. Harris?
Here.
Thank you. Mrs. Maroon?
Here.
Mr. Oliver?
Here.
Mr. Pulsifer? Mrs. Stats?
Here.
Mr. Eo?
Here.
And Dr. Susan?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Can we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Correspondence is as listed. Before I turn it over to Dr. Antunes, I'm going to ask Mr. Handler to put the phone number up to leave messages for public comments so we can open it up a little earlier, and we will hear from the superintendent and then go to committee reports and then to public comment. Thank you. Dr. Antunes.
Thank you, Dr. Swasan. I'm thrilled to share that 12 Hillsborough High School seniors were named as National Merit semifinalists. More than 1.5 million students apply for the highly competitive scholarship, and the semifinalists represent less than 1% of all high school seniors. Approximately 16,000 high school seniors will compete for scholarships that will be offered beginning in August and concluding in July. To become a finalist, students and high school administrators must submit a detailed application that includes student academic records, leadership abilities, and honors and awards received. Please join me in congratulating the following students, and I'll apologize on the front side if I mispronounce anyone's name. Nipan Banjare, Adam Gottlieb, Kartik Kher, Olivia Kong, Arav Krishnan, Emily Pan, Shirley Pang, Sapna Rachapudi, Samuel Renz, Wasif Sami, Nidhi Tolpati, and Grace Zhang. As members of the community are aware, Mayor Thompson issued a health advisory on Friday, citing several instances of probable positive COVID-19 originating from DC Gymnastics. We have been in contact with our health officer, Siobhan Spano, since Friday afternoon and over the weekend. As our students and parents of students in grades 7 to 12 know, we have shut down some athletics for 2 weeks. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of providing accurate, timely, and complete information to the health department. Remember that COVID-19 is a public health concern, not just a concern related to school, athletics, rec, etc. Please Please, please do not allow your children to attend parties or social events that are not practicing physical distancing. And remember that face coverings are essential. As cases are expanding and we're experiencing crossover, concerns continue to rise. Those who are supposed to be quarantining are not doing so and putting many others at risk. Athletes ought not be going out on their own practicing on other fields in town or out of town. Not only is the season in terms of athletics in jeopardy, but our entire educational plan is in jeopardy because our community is having difficulty acting in the best interest for each other. It is also important to note that as we prepare for the opening of school on Tuesday, September 29th, anyone who has chosen the hybrid model and has been instructed to quarantine may not enter the school building until the quarantine period is over. They may, if feeling well enough, participate in virtual learning for the time frame of the quarantine. Additionally, SATs are scheduled for Wednesday. However, if your child has been instructed to quarantine, she or they may not report to take the SATs at that time. Please reach out to Ms. Smedley directly, who will roll over the registration to the October date. Finally, please be sure to bring a water bottle to school next week. While the water fountains are not available, the water filling stations are ready for everyone. The bubblers have been turned off, but the water filling portion is available. Thank you, Dr. Swasson.
Thank you, Dr. Antunes. I do want to repeat again Dr. Antunes' message that it's really important for everybody to take personal responsibility, wear a mask, and if you do come in contact with somebody who has tested positive for COVID, please ensure that you are truthful and that you are doing everything you can to ensure the safety of our community. I relate to people a story about one of my daughters who is now a nurse, but she never responded to a vaccine, which 96% of people respond to. And looking at her, you would never know that she was at higher risk for that infectious disease. Luckily, most of the population is immune due to a vaccine. But similarly with COVID, you could be looking at your child and think that this child is absolutely healthy in every other way, but there might be something about his or her or their genetic makeup that makes them more susceptible to a very severe disease. So think about that before you allow your children who have been exposed to continue any risky behavior, or to allow them to actually go to parties and things like that where they may come in contact with people who have COVID. Okay, with that, I will turn to committee reports, and we will start with, who wants to start? Mr. Gillette?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. Operations Committee met on September 17th. We had quite a bit on the agenda. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the last thing we talked about, which was committee meeting minutes. And Ms. Stotts brought up an issue about how we report minutes at the board meetings, what the purpose maybe of the minutes are, etc. And it was a good discussion. I don't know how much I should report out about it, which is part of the dilemma. So I'll just tell you what I said at the meeting was that when I'm making the committee reports to the board, I'm primarily making them for other board members, not for the public. Although the public, I think, can learn a lot from what we discuss at the committee level. But there's so many things that we discuss at the committee level. And Mrs. Stotts, her specific question was, could we not make some version of committee reports available to the public? And we sort of talked about that, and maybe Mr. LaPierre can weigh in on that. But there's so many legal things we talk about, even confidential things, and even things that are not legally confidential. Things like we're getting ready to maybe negotiate some kind of building contract or find a new professional or something. So not necessarily personnel issues, but other things. But maybe Mr. LaPierre could weigh in for a second.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be glad to. So a couple of things come up in terms of committee reports. In the past, we have had OPRA requests, Open Public Records Act requests for committee reports. That involves a pretty significant process to go through to determine what information can be disclosed. So there often are things in committee reports that are pre-decisional and that are what we would call advisory, consultative, or deliberative, right? Proposals may be advanced. We may have given a lot of thought to them or very little thought to them. They may just be an idea that someone has, and they ultimately may not be taken up by the board. So a lot of that pre-decisional information is exempt from disclosure. And the reason for that is because if all of that information was subject to disclosure, the concept is that that might chill the conversations and it may not result in people advancing those ideas, even if they're not perhaps fully vetted or thought out or whatever the case may be. So there's a significant amount of information that may be embedded in those reports that wouldn't be subject to disclosure, that you would not want to disclose and you're legally permitted not to disclose. There may also be other issues that are confidential for negotiations reasons or personnel reasons. So, you're not prohibited from making a version or a portion of those minutes subject to public access by any means, or publishing them in some fashion. But it does take a good bit of work to do, because you need to be very careful as to what you disclose and what you don't disclose. And obviously, if people want to make Open Public Records Act requests, they are allowed to do that, but that often will come along with a pretty thorough review to make sure that there are things that we don't disclose that we should not be. So I don't know if that answered your question exactly. It was a little bit long-winded, but basically you can disclose them sometimes, but definitely things that you want to take care about not disclosing.
Thank you very much. And I think the second thing that Mrs. Stotts wanted from the committee report discussion was to have better committee reports. So I'm going to try to give her a good committee report now. If you don't mind, I'll get on with that. So we had our architect of record, Mr. Wozni, came in specifically to talk about roofing and other projects. Yes, roofing projects were delayed slightly. If you know anything about construction, this would be considered a minor delay, believe me. And they're delayed because of some substantial changes to the work orders that we had to do, specifically at the middle school. The previous roofing project left a lot of debris and other things that had to be actually taken away by hand. So it was a big issue there. But roofing projects should be substantially completed by the end of this week, with only some trim work or other miscellaneous work on those roofing projects after that. So we're hopeful for that. He's reporting that. I'll take him at his word. We'll see what happens. But I think he's right about that. Let's see. Okay, so that was all the roofing. We had discussion about the sports teams and marching band, what fields they could use. And Dr. Antuna said she's going to, I think we're looking into whatever, or assigning that to somebody to look into whatever we can do for them. But it was difficult this time to because the marching band needs a football field or something lined with the lines for a football field. And it's difficult to make that happen now, but we'll get that done as soon as we can. We had discussion about the HES playground, which is still not complete. We're going to have some work done to make sure that the building official can inspect the footings, which were not able to be inspected, but that works. It's going to require some digging. So, Mr. Mahmood, I saw you had a shovel in the back of your car, so I assume you're going to be out there digging. I appreciate that. Thank you, everybody chipping in. And the other project was the access to the playground, which we're getting done. We also had discussion about the controls, the building maintenance system controls at the schools. This was a legacy from Honeywell and the ESIP portion. We've been sort of I wouldn't say battling with them, but they have it's a proprietary system, which when we're not doing business with Honeywell and that anymore, they kind of locked us out of that. We can't pay for an upgrade or something. So this is something that Our architect is working out with them. We want to be able to use the management system to be able to see the energy usage across our district. This was something that was promised in the EASA program, and this is now 6 years down the road or whatever it is, and we don't have it yet. So that's something, 6 years almost, right? It's been a while. We'd like to be able to manage because it's supposed to save energy. And if we don't know how much energy we're using in what times of day, in which buildings, then we can't really save any energy. So that's an issue. But Mr. Wazzy is working on getting that resolved. We talked for a while about mechanical systems and indoor air quality, and Mr. Wozni spoke quite a bit about ionization systems, which he has found to be successful in other schools. He's looking into those systems for our district, which I think would be great. Let's see. I really could use bullet points on these. That's my fault. I'm sorry about that. A lot of single sentences here. Okay. We talked about an issue that only some board members may know exists, that the older elementary schools in particular that have sinks in their classrooms, not all of them actually have hot water to those sinks. They're just cold water sinks only. And so we're working on getting those sinks to be able to have hot water. That's something that we're actually going to do. We're not just talking about it. It's going to be done to the extent that we can do it. Let's see, page 4. We talked about issues at the middle school, having to do with one room that had mold that's being remediated. It's probably already done, complete. Okay, good. We talked about the purpose of exhaust fans and how they're going to be paid for in the referendum, which that they are going to. That's part of the referendum plan, I should say. And those were slated to be done next summer, but to the extent that we can, we're going to move up the exhaust fans work to this year. The exhaust fans, or we had an explanation that exhaust fans are graded on how well they're doing. An exhaust fan that's graded poor doesn't mean it's not working. Just means it's not working optimally. We have very few that are working optimally, by the way. Exhaust fans are used in the large rooms like the gyms, maybe large cafeterias, to move air. We talked about roof repair at HES. This is an ongoing issue. And the rainstorms we had a couple of weeks ago delayed the repair, but they're working on it. I think it's almost done. It's done. Okay, good. We only met on like Thursday, and it's Monday. They did it over the weekend, says Mr. Mahmood. Very good. Appreciate that. Our audit is just about complete. We don't anticipate any findings, which is good. We had a discussion. I don't know if I should talk about this yet. Capital and maintenance reserve accounts, but we will be making deposits into capital reserve and maintenance reserve accounts. But I'm going to hold off till next month until the audit's complete, so we know what those amounts will be. For sure. Oh, it's on tonight. Oh, that's right. I forgot. It's on tonight. So you'll see that on tonight, actually. But it's so these are the up to amounts, right? Okay. So we did well, and you'll see that we'll talk about that when we get to that. I forgot about that. It was on tonight. Last week's meeting and this week's meeting are running together because they're so close. All right. Let me see. We talked about one of the biggest things we talked about was an issue that Ms. Trujillo brought up in between meetings about local fair share and what we're doing about some issues with local fair share. We talked about how far we were below local fair share and what we can do. And that means that when you're below local fair share, it means that you are collecting a lesser amount of taxes than the state expects you to collect for your school district, and ultimately it puts you in tough shape with funding the district. So we were something like $5.5 million below local fair share in last year's, and we're going to get the numbers soon about how far below we are this year, and see if we can do something to alleviate that problem. And that's it. I'll take questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gillette. Mrs. Haas, would you please give the Education Committee report?
Okay. The Education Committee, also known as the best committee ever, met on September 15th. We looked at exactly 31 different curricula in the area of math, business, applied technology, performing arts, and family and consumer science. And most of these were minimal changes, but they still have to be approved. They reflect the reconfiguration of the courses that we did earlier in the year, and most of it was straightforward. We have to approve a new curriculum for the area of dance because it's required for CUSAC, even though there are no immediate plans to develop a dance program. So we unanimously agreed to that. We went through policy reviews. Two of the policies are on tonight for first reading: the heat participation policy for student athlete safety and the immunization policy. And we had basically the heat participation policy is, as it was, but we were talking a little bit about the immunization policy, and some of us felt that it might be worthwhile to have the flu vaccine added to the policy. However, it was suggested that since anything that we required that the state doesn't require could cause a problem, we're going to wait for guidance from the state. But if I may say so, I'd really appreciate it if everybody goes out and gets a flu shot this year. The last thing we need is further confusion between the flu and COVID. So the more people who could be protected from at least one of them, the better. We also reviewed the professional development plan and mentoring plan. Basically what happens is that our assistant superintendent completes a statement of assurances that's required by the state, and basically it was just adjusted to account for how the district would continue to provide professional development during the pandemic. We also discussed the dance team varsity letter update, and I believe, Ms. Maroon, did you have your meeting yet? Okay, but Ms. Maroon was going to be helping the administration develop the appropriate criteria. And we had a couple of non-agenda item discussions, which related to teacher attendance and substitutes, and whether or not the special education classes that were taking place at the time of our meeting were covered. So we talked about those things, and just in terms of an item carried forward, we talked a little bit about full-day kindergarten, thinking about potentially revisiting this issue in the fall. This year we took a big hit in terms of our enrollment for kindergarten. And to some degree, yes, full-day kindergarten will cost more than half-day kindergarten, but it will increase our state aid. And frankly, when we have kids coming in from a variety of different private schools, it creates an expense to the district when we have to remediate to get everybody at the same level. So we'll be looking at that in the future. And that's basically it.
Thank you. Mr. Pulsifer, can I ask you to review the Human Resources Committee meeting minutes, please?
Yes, I can. The Human Resources Committee also met last Thursday, September 17th. We began with this discussion of policy regarding the use of social networking sites. We had an interesting discussion, but we did not come to a closure on that, so we have tabled that until our next meeting to continue that discussion. Dr. Tunis gave us advance notice about a grievance that would be coming our way, which is part of this earlier executive session, to give the Human Resources Committee an update on that. This actually happened at the end of the meeting, but I'll hit it now in the order of items. We also discussed the superintendent's evaluation, the process, and something else that was part of the executive session earlier. But we did that last because we needed to remove administration from the HR committee meeting at that point. We also reviewed staffing for the district as we were opening up here. Mr. Callahan shared that we have 11 staff members that have been approved or will be approved for childcare leaves. 6 of those positions have been filled with long-term substitutes, and we're working on the rest. We also discussed medical leave requests and reasonable accommodations that have been made, and we will continue to work on that. One thing that came out of that discussion is as we try to backfill some of these positions, that we should adjust how the closing dates and how things are listed on AppleTrack so that we can have positions open longer to try and get people in to fill the positions that have opened up. We also had a discussion about the school nurse vacancies. And part of this was clarification for the committee and from what we're hearing from the public. All 9 of our schools have nurses. 2 of the schools have contracted service providers. And therefore, any communications coming out of those schools are coming from district nurses that are employees of the district. So they may not be the nurse that is in that particular school, but there are nurses in every school. There was some public concern, and I believe we received emails questioning whether or not we had nurses in buildings. One other item we discussed, as you can imagine, in this virtual world, the load on the technology department has significantly increased. The number of help desk tickets is much higher, and we're also having to spend time supporting parents as they help their children with technology at home. So there is an item on tonight's agenda for a temporary position. Should be 2 resolutions to create 2 positions for temporary to help support the help desk. And lastly, we also had a discussion about local fair share, which carried on from some of the information that had come out of the operations committee earlier. And that was our meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer. So now we have comments from the board and public. So I will read the statement. We very much welcome input from the public. During virtual board meetings, there will be one time during board meetings that the public is invited to submit and record questions or comments. Members of the public may comment about any item that is listed on tonight's agenda before the board votes or may choose to discuss any topic. Tonight's option is to call in and leave a message on a recording that will be played for the board and public to hear. There is a 3-minute time limit per speaker. Before you submit or record your question or comment, we ask that you provide your name and address. Please understand that our virtual public forums are not structured as question and answer sessions, but rather are offered as opportunities to share your thoughts with the board. In instances where the board believes that there is a misunderstanding or inaccuracy, the board president or superintendent will address the comment. There may be times when a member of the public makes a comment or asks a question about personnel or hiring decisions. New Jersey statutes do not permit the board to discuss personnel issues in public session. So we do have a few. I'll just go here. I'm doing that. Okay. I did that. Which one? This one? Okay.
My name is Marissa Sladek, and I live at 681 Dover Court, Unit E in Hillsborough. When I think of Hillsborough, I think of the 2 words minimum and maximum. The board expects the maximum from its teachers and staff. The teachers provide the maximum to its students. We are consistently ranked among the best in the state if not the country. Our bright students consistently go to the top colleges and universities. Despite this, the board is providing the minimum to the teachers, staff, and students. It's putting the teachers, staff, and students at risk. It's putting its teachers that they expect so much of in harm's way. As a result, our students are suffering. My own student in middle school has had 2 teachers leave already. At the last meeting, the public had to hear a very outspoken board member belittle and berate the union for advocating for their members. That board member resulted to calling the union a chapstick organization. The teachers and staff are so much more. They are the maximum. Can we say the same thing about you, Board of Education? Thank you.
Bob Fenster, Hillsborough High School Social Studies. At last week's Board of Education meeting, I was shocked to hear a member of the board attack the HEA Pride Committee, ridiculing its efforts as merely passing out lip balms and Band-Aid cases at a football game. The same board member was in attendance at virtually every meeting when Elena Masseri shared the work that Pride was doing. The list of activities from a single month is too much to include in the time that I have. But some of the bigger items were providing thousands of dollars to local food pantry and soup kitchens during the pandemic, working with local restaurants to feed Hillsborough's first responders, supporting local organizations to raise awareness of mental health and substance abuse issues, and being named the Partner of the Year by the Somerset County ARC for all the work HEA members did to help maintain their group homes. Go back and watch the meeting videos and you can see the members of the Board of Education smiling and applauding after each of Elena's reports. Members of the Board of Education have thankless jobs, but they should never forget it is a privilege to serve the community. One of the most important parts of the job is listening to all of the community's stakeholders. It's quite clear that the listening comprehension skills need work. The fact that only one member of the board spoke up in defense of Pride after that tirade is a sad commentary on the attitude of this administration towards its staff. But in the spirit of the comments from last week, I want to offer a constructive solution. An immediate and sincere apology by the board member in question and from those who applauded her comment.
My name is Marnie Pochask. I live in Rockaway, New Jersey. My question / comment is, I'm confused. Dr. Antunes stated that students who had contracted COVID recently were not socially distancing and not wearing masks and such, and we know that those are ways to eliminate the spread of this. However, I know in my classroom, I physically cannot fit the amount of students that I will have, even with the lessening and the alternate hybrid schedule. There is still not 6 feet in between desks. It was not physically possible to do in my classroom. So that's one concern I have. And my other concern is that students are going to be taking masks off for at least 20 minutes to eat their snack during their half-day schedule. These are 2 major factors that Dr. Antunes has just said are why these students have gotten this illness, yet we're not doing anything to protect them in the classrooms from those same 2 issues.
Henry Goodhue, Hillsborough Education Association. First and foremost, we would like to thank the business office for beginning to respond to the OPA requests, some of which have been outstanding for over a month. As you know, the HEA has requested an HVAC performance report to determine whether our buildings are ventilating properly. The district responded that, quote, this request is technically denied because the board does not have any documents meeting this description. The board then referenced POSH indoor air quality reports, which they admitted were, quote, not HVAC performance reports per se. To be clear, when asked about the functionality of our HVAC systems, the board has tacitly admitted that they do not know its full status and offered only preventative maintenance logs as evidence from which they drew their conclusion that buildings were safe. The HEA also sought reports on the functionality of exhaust fans used to ventilate our buildings. Contrary to the district's response that asserted the list represented all exhaust fans in the district, the notes only provided fans listed at the high school and middle school. No information was provided on the other 7 buildings currently occupied. In the previous meeting, board leadership dismissed concerns related to exhaust fans, claiming that they were mostly used to ventilate larger areas or areas not regularly occupied. Yet when we went through the list of locations, it became apparent that this was not true, as over 146 of the 182 listed fans serviced classrooms or other areas occupied by staff and students. Of the 182 fans listed, 94 were rated as poor and in need of serious repair or replacement. Many were not functioning at all. We understand that referendum work has been moved up to address approximately 50 fans, but this is clearly not all of them. Furthermore, without knowing the functionality of the other 7 schools, it is impossible to truly know the status of our buildings and determine if they are safe. Frankly, we cannot fathom how minimum has become what the board views as an acceptable measurement of success or safety. We further struggle to understand why the board would even return staff and students to active construction sites, let alone ones without permits or inspections, something that was never disclosed to the community at the time that the buildings were reoccupied. Similarly, board and district leadership failed to disclose to staff a possible spread of COVID within our school community. Staff did not receive any communication last week regarding the community spread and were instead informed by parents who found out when they received an email from Dr. Antunes. Shouldn't staff have been appropriately advised of possible risks and viral spread? Aren't they owed more than minimum in terms of communication about their health and safety? Now, before a board member or a member of the administration attempts to deflect from the concerns raised or the lack of transparency plaguing our district, let me be clear. None of this has anything to do with the efforts of our members, especially our B&G and custodial members who have worked tirelessly to prepare our buildings despite the lack of supplies and planning from the board and district leadership. And partial information. You have disregarded multiple offers to collaboratively address these issues, choosing instead to attack philanthropic work. You were elected to guide the district and keep students and staff safe, yet somehow have become solely focused upon proving that you are right, despite
Dana Gordon, 4 Dumont Round, Hillsborough, New Jersey. First, thank you, Dr. Antunes and Dr. Soisson, for expressing the seriousness of our COVID cases in our town. Per the New Jersey COVID dashboard, the New Jersey rate of refusal for contact tracing is currently 56%. That's over half of the positive cases not giving contact. This is the 3rd board meeting that I'll come to you with statistics about what's happening here in Hillsborough with the COVID virus. I have collected data from the Doug Thompson Post and Hillsborough 311 since March. I have been analyzing it for trends. The first time I came to you was 2 meetings ago, and my comment was read by Dr. Soisson. I explained that Hillsborough does not have a hold on this virus. I gave you data and about a trend where I explained that 45% of the new cases from the past month were school-aged residents. I also explained that our cases were 6 times higher than they should be. After last week's board meeting, I emailed you with more recent numbers. There was a discussion at the last week's meeting about how we're part of the West Central region, which has lowest rates, and how all key numbers were good for us. Hillsborough was abuzz with how wonderful that news was, but it was very misleading. Hillsborough's key numbers are nowhere near good. Our cases 2 weeks ago, while better than the prior meeting, were an average of 4 times better than the benchmark of 5 cases per 100,000. But my report for you tonight is even more alarming. It's not fear-mongering, it's just facts based on data. This past week, we've had a spike. The case count was significant enough to have a health advisory and an email from Dr. Antunes. We had 33 new cases last week. Of these 33 cases, 1/3 are school-aged. Based on the advisory, these cases were spread child to child when we've been hearing all along that children do not present as much of a concern about passing the virus to each other. Now we have the proof that children can clearly pass and do spread the virus. The numbers are equivalent to 82.5% cases per 100,000 residents. That's over 16 times what the acceptable rate is. We have a major problem. Our town has not embraced safety. We have not done what now neighboring towns have done to get our numbers down, and now we're back in a major spread that's affecting students and their families. And this is not just affecting us. Surrounding townships are seeing dramatic increases, which is indicative of a much larger problem. Today, we had 6 new cases. I understand that there are people who want schools to open. I understand people want their life back to normal. However, I understand that some of these same people work in companies that won't reopen until 2021 for in-person meetings or travel because they know it's not safe. Last board meeting, I kept hearing the words, be the solution, and I'm trying to be a solution to the greater problem, another outbreak. Please reconsider, do not open the schools. Please reconsider and do not open the schools and send the teachers to work from home. Virtual learning as a district is the safest plan we can have. Thank you.
Hi, this is Sharmishta here. I would like to know how the hybrid and virtual model is going to work for the middle school. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Leisha Gaber-Bayless from Hillsborough. I hope that one day soon, the Board of Education and the HEA will work together as a unit. Separately, it has come to my attention that the district has decided the IXL app will not be allowed for use in any of the elementary schools because it goes against the district's philosophy. If this is the case, it deeply frustrates me. While some students will have difficulty with some sections, others could use it to further their knowledge base and be challenged. My son learned about rays and angles from the geometry level tab last year on his own while being taught 10 plus 100 and 100 minus 10 in class. We need to support all levels of learners, including those with higher abilities. 2 years ago, we had a special pull-out class for higher literacy. The children loved it and looked forward to it. I should have asked our principal at the time if we could have the same for math. I understand we lost many positions last year, but why remove the ability to use this IXL app? If it's the cost, we could fundraise, and we could get it that way for all of the elementary schools. When I grew up, we had mixed classes, so third graders who had high math skills sat in fourth grade classes. Bridgewater offers an accelerated class for second graders, and I believe in higher. Following up on a topic mentioned a few months ago by the board at a public meeting, I wonder when will the district make a final decision on whether they will combine higher math classes with lower ones at Eris. I do not think it is right for a teacher to have to teach so many different levels in one classroom. For those listening, I have created a Facebook group called Advocating for Advanced Learners in Hillsborough, New Jersey. Please join if you are interested. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Didier Jimenez. I live in Gemini Drive. I just want to take this opportunity to tell my Hillsborough town and Hillsborough teachers and everybody watching, you're not alone. Do not think that the gaslighting going on from the Board of Ed department and rants are really a reflection of what's happening in Hillsborough. The HEA Pride Committee has done a lot of amazing things here in Hillsborough and has supported the youth here. Do not think you are alone. We support you. As somebody who does not have any kids, I know that we need to pay attention regardless and make sure that everybody registers to go out and vote. Decisions have consequences at the voting booth, and I encourage everybody to take advantage of that. We need to bring a huge turnout this November to make sure that we get represented properly in the Board of Ed. I am ashamed of my Board of Ed, how it has been just emotional rants, and some people can't take the heat, so they say that you have to get out the kitchen. So that's all I have to say. Thank you so much. Bye.
That's all the public comment I've received. So we'll close public comment for now, and we'll open up board comment. Mr. Gillette.
Yeah, so this is for, I guess, for Dr. Antunes, whoever is dealing with the township health department. So it is, as we heard from a couple of members of the public tonight, it is concerning that we see some cases. I don't like to use the word cases. I think that's unscientific. I don't think having a positive test makes you a case. First of all, but that's the way. That's what they're doing with COVID-19. They're calling any positive test a case. Never heard that thing before in my 56 years, but okay. But do we ever follow up on those cases to see if anyone becomes ill? Do we know that people? Do we know that? Do we know people could become ill? Are we allowed to know that?
So the health department will let us know if there's a case, because then we have a letter that we will send out to, dependent upon where the case is, either to the staff and the community of the school that the case is in. They are doing the contact tracing, so we wouldn't know unless we get told by someone else, or the teacher or staff member or parent tells us. So that can happen, yes. And we always follow up. If a parent or staff member tells us, we let them know they need to call the Department of Health, and then we communicate.
So, but we don't know out of positive cases how many people that had a positive test became ill, if any.
No.
Okay. Because I think yes, these more positive tests do concern me, but I feel that the longer this goes on, the more we're backing ourselves into an ethical corner here. We're painting ourselves in. When the CDC is coming out with prediction that maybe during this year, 100 school-age children will die of COVID-19, and every year, 500 school-age children die of the flu. Ethically, we can never open the school buildings again. Well, how can we ever open them again? If this is going to be, if a positive case, without even knowing that the person ever becomes ill from the positive test, this is, I don't know the answer to that. I don't think we can ever open school buildings again. And it's said. Do you have an answer, Dr. Tunis?
Well, I was just going to say that Miss Spano does let us know, but because of HIPAA, we have limited information. So she might say to me, we have a positive case, it's asymptomatic, or she might say we have a positive case and they're ill. So it just depends. But to the extent that you're asking, no.
3% of cases in New Jersey positive tests are from school-age children, but 0% of New Jersey deaths are school-age children. So, I mean, but there will be, maybe a dozen or whatever or more flu deaths of school-age children this year in New Jersey, maybe. So I don't know, if this is the standard, I don't know if we can ever open school again.
Mrs. Stats.
Regarding what Mr. Gillette said, we've had there's been very little opportunity for our students or school-age children to have been exposed to the virus to the extent that in past experiences with, the schools being open up until, well, next week, at least here. Also, concern is not just of the students, but of staff and the rest of the community, where obviously we now accept that children can spread it to others, including older students and adults, and like I said, the rest of the community. So I do have a concern with that, and with the increase in positive cases, and as we open up the schools, that I would just think logically that's going to continue to increase. And I also have a concern about the staffing issues, as we have more and more teachers that are opting to take a leave because they're not permitted to work from home, under the hybrid model. I have a concern for the quality of education for our students, as we try to solve that problem, and instead of using quality teachers. And just in general, there's so many conflicting reports. And again, I'd rather err on the side of safety and health, side of caution, that, the quality of the air, the aerosolization. Like I said, there are different reports with that, but I'd rather err on the side of caution. And the condition of our HVAC units, through no fault of our buildings and grounds, we're asking them to do the impossible. We may as well ask them to, put a unicorn in every classroom. We're expecting them to do the impossible. I just don't think we're ready to open. And I think we can offer, it's been said that, we have to say what we're going to do going forward to open up the schools. Well, as was said in the operations, I forget the architect's name. We can look into the ionization procedures that can be applied to our HVAC, and that can be done in a timely fashion. So I do think we should, again, seriously consider delaying opening our schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Stats. Mr. Oliver.
I almost forgot to unmute my mic. Just a couple of comments and maybe a question or two. So the one caller says that Dr. Antunes made a statement about children not social distancing. I didn't hear that. I heard that we're asking the children to wear their masks and socially distance. So I'm just a little confused as to maybe what some of the callers had brought in and said. I see our children taking this seriously, our parents taking this seriously. I know we had an outbreak. There was a gymnastics studio in town, had an outbreak. It resulted in some positive tests. We don't know if they're asymptomatic. It doesn't matter whether they're ill or they're asymptomatic. They could spread it to someone else. I get that. But that's all done through the health department. The health department makes those calls. That's not the school's responsibility. That's the health department. And I think the health department's doing as good a job as they can on that. I'd like to put to bed this Oprah request, because I keep hearing that our buildings are safe and our air quality is safe. So maybe if Mr. Mahmood could address that. And before you do, the other question I heard from the public was about these permits and inspections that were not being done properly. I think that was a little bit blown out of proportion, and maybe Mr. Gillette could jump on that to just satisfy that. I'd like to put the games, the he said, she said, the you did this and I did that, I'd like to put that to bed. I thought I made that clear in my comments last meeting. I'd like to put it to bed. I'd like to work through this together. I'd like to come up with solutions, not problems. The permit thing was maybe a little bit of a snafu. Whose fault was it? It doesn't matter whose fault it was. It was fixed the very next day. I think it was fixed in less than 8 or 10 hours, and the stop order was lifted. I keep hearing that the quality of the buildings the air quality is good. We're putting the best available filters in those systems. We've had kids in the school. They haven't been sick. The quality of the education in this virtual plan is horrible. It is horrible. I have 2 children in school. They are not getting an education right now. They need to be back in the classroom with the kids, And I can't stress that any more importantly than that. They're not getting a good quality education in this virtual model. And I have two living, breathing examples of it. So I'd ask just Mr. Mahmood and Mr. Gillette if you could just address those 2 points, and let's put it to bed.
I'll just say something about the permits, and Ms. Mahmood, you can correct me if I'm wrong, and then you can go right into your piece. So all the construction work plans were filed promptly when they were ready with the construction office. They were reviewed, and permits were issued, but the communication from the construction office didn't reach who was supposed to reach for the whether it's the contractor or the architect, and they can battle out with each other about who was responsible for going to pick up the finished, reviewed and approved permit. That's all that happened. They were approved in July, but they needed to be picked up and paid for. That's how you know they're picked up, when they're paid for. When we were notified a few weeks ago that they were not reviewed and approved permits were not picked up and paid, we got that done in less than 24 hours, as Mr. Oliver said. Mr. Moon.
No, you're absolutely right, Mr. Gillette. However, I do want to say that the town official, the town construction official, did shut us down. I mean, that was also, we have to put that on record, that as a result of the permits not being picked up, Mr. Fiedler actually shut us down, and he visited several of our sites. He actually went out and he visited several of the buildings. I believe Buildings and Grounds escorted him into the various sites, but that did take place as well. And then we did get the permits, as you said, within a short amount of time paid for, and then he took away the released the stoppage of the work, so we were able to get the contractors back up. But I just want to mention that he did put a stop on all the work for a short period of time. And as far as the buildings and the report, I know Mr. DeLuca is with us, so I would probably need your help, Tony, on the piece for the elementary schools. For the exhaust fans, I know that we responded to the Oprah request, and I know that we spoke to Vic for a lengthy period of time. Was there more work, Tony, that we're doing on the elementary schools as far as the exhaust fans?
Yes, the elementary schools have been evaluated. They are in the process of being repaired. At the elementary school level, the exhausts are independent exhausts. They're individual exhausts in the bathrooms, faculty and student bathrooms, the cafeteria, the kitchen, and some of the gyms. I don't have the full report yet. They are working on it. I'm waiting for our mechanical contractor to send them to me. A very large majority of them are operational. They are operational in the majority of elementary schools, but by the week's end, I should have the report on them. And like I said, the majority of them are independent units that work, and they are working and they are evaluated. Yes, I will have the reports.
So, my suggestion would be, even though we did respond to the Oprah request with the documents that we have on hand at the time, I would just treat it like a continuing request in this sense. So I know that Mr. Goodhue made a request for those reports. Once we get the reports, then we can turn around and make copies, because they're being provided digitally, but we can send him a copy of those reports. In response to his request that we already responded to, we can go ahead and just send him that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. And also I wanted to talk, Mr. Oliver, about sort of one of the things that we are doing is every day since we realized that we're going with the hybrid is Tony is working with our HVAC contractor because one of the things we couldn't do right up front is do an independent assessment of every room in the entire district. That was a task that we couldn't just do. That wasn't going to be feasible, but it's something that as a management plan, we are looking into that. However, in talking to our HVAC experts, we are tackling the areas that we felt needed to be addressed. And that's sort of the approach that we've been taking. So I hope that answers the questions, or at least most. If not, I'd be happy to answer any others.
Mr. Gillette.
Yeah, so I have a question for Ivan. So we heard today from a member of the public that very many exhaust fans, like dozens or hundreds, I don't know how many, are in student classrooms, but it doesn't appear to be the case. I never heard that before tonight. What was described by the architect to us was that they were in the bathrooms, the kitchens, places that you put exhaust fans, and they're almost all of them are not tied into our HVAC system. They're independent systems, as Mr. DeLuca just. So can you just verify that's true?
Yeah, that is. We discussed that with the architect. That is part of the minutes. That was very clear on our discussion that while all of the fans that we're talking about, the ones that at least I think we're talking about, are separate from the HVAC system. However, the ones that we listed that we shared for the Oprah request, those, as we mentioned, some could be listed as poor, but still operable. That doesn't mean that they're not operable. But the answer to your question, Mr. Gillette, is yes, that the exhaust fans that I believe we're talking about are separate from the HVAC system, but those that are the ones that we're talking about are in common areas, and that's the ones that we're focusing on.
Lisa Maroon.
Hi. I just want to comment a little bit here too about, I guess, the students. Nobody is mentioning anything about what the students want. And the students, haven't been sending in the messages. And as somebody who always wants to think of the students first before anything, I can honestly say that they want to be back. And we're trying our best to make it as safe as possible for them. And in 17 years of teaching myself, this is the first year that I've surveyed my students who are back on a hybrid model, and they have said to me every day, we wish we could be back even more. That's what we want. They want to be in school. For the first time, they're not like, oh, I'd rather be home sleeping. No, they want to be in school. And yes, we need to make it safe. And the things that I'm noticing with at least my students, and I'm hoping that Hillsborough students would feel the same way, at least at the high school level for me, that if I ask them to do A, B, and C safety-wise, they're doing it because they don't want to go back home. They don't want to be all virtual again. They don't want this thing to be how it was in the spring, and they don't want to be stuck. They don't want to be quarantined. So they will jump through hoops to do what it takes to stay safe. If I ask them to jump, they say how high. I mean, and I just feel for the students, and I feel like we need to start taking their opinions into considerations and asking them what they want to feel comfortable and how they can help their teachers feel comfortable. Maybe that will help even ease some of the teachers. I don't know.
Thank you. Mrs. Stats.
Mr. Oliver, I appreciate your opinion, but it is based on just your personal experience. But to say that the quality of the virtual education is horrible is, I use this word a lot. It's a concern of mine to generalize about it. First of all, it's still fairly new, especially I don't think we can even refer to what happened in the spring. Right, it's still new. And so we're trying to get all the little kinks ironed out. Mr. Handler, I think, is trying, and his team is trying to improve that as much as possible, as well as the students and the teachers and the whole staff. Having said that, even if we open up the schools next year for the hybrid model, it'll still be done the same way. All the learning will be done through the Chromebooks, basically. Even the students who are in the classroom, that will have to be done that way because of the students whose parents have chosen to be home and learn virtually. I do think the quality probably can be better. I don't know about the quality of instruction, maybe the technology, and everybody's working hard to improve that. It's amazing. Even on Facebook, I see people sharing their ideas. Students are really, and I think Ms. Maroon sort of alluded to it. They're like, if a teacher's laptop shuts down, the students sort of take over or whatever, and the teacher comes back, and it's sort of similar to if the teacher stepped out of the classroom and the students are still acting in an appropriate manner. So I really do think it's offensive to say that the quality of the virtual education is horrible. Thank you.
Mrs. Trujillo?
I just wanted to share a comment that one of my 3 children said to me. That child said, "I love all my teachers. They're so nice. I'm so lucky. Every year I get a good bunch." So that was last week, and I just thought that was really nice that that child said that to me. I'm not revealing gender. So you'll have to guess which one of the 3 it was. But we've had a positive experience with virtual learning, so that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Trujillo. Mr. Oliver?
So I'll read a text from several parents, and it was, child's already done with school, took attendance and gave 4 easy problems worksheet, done for the day. That was, 30 minutes into class. So I don't necessarily think it's my opinion. I think it's happening in a lot of cases. I think we could do a better job at the virtual. We've been at this a while. I know it's changed, but again, I'm going to go back to Mrs. Maroon's comments that the kids want to be back in school, and we're not listening. We're coming up with every reason why they shouldn't be back in school instead of figuring out reasons how to get them back into school safely. That's the bottom line. We're here for the children. We're here for the teachers. We need to figure out how to get them back in the classroom. We need to get them back in the classroom quickly and safely. There's some other school districts that have pushed up their hybrid models. I hear, data that's telling us differently. Like anything else, you could spin the data. Again, I'm not making light of it. I think this is a real problem. But if we go back to Mr. Gillette's comments, and this is with us for a while. We can't stay in lockdown and put our kids in their rooms and put them in bubbles and go through a virtual model. We got to get them back in school, and I think that's what we were put here to do. I think that the taxpayers in town entrusted us with those plans, and we need to figure out a way. We have to work together to figure out a way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Mrs. Harris?
Can you hear me? Thank you. The HEA leadership has asked in their social media blitzes why I would pick pride to focus on in my comments last week. The reason being, in doing so, the organization was able to focus on the positive things that they give back to the community. And I hope that they will continue to do so. In doing this reflection and generating quite an impressive list of things that they've done over the years, they've shown how they have worked together to benefit the community. And that is what their focus should be during this pandemic. This is what I like to think is the better formation of why they exist. Now, there's been a lot of negativity on social media, and I would like to address some of that. The problem that was cited was there were several pictures posted that showed conditions in our school to be less than desirable. The pictures depicted some of the before pitfalls of our referendum goals. And there's still things that need to be addressed. They were negative, they were disappointing, and truly not representative of the hundreds of classrooms in the 9 buildings in our district. As any homeowner knows, with every upgrade comes a period of time when there is upheaval and messiness as improvements are being done. Okay, we all would have liked to have seen phase 1 of our upgrade completed by September 1st. But unexpected repairs that became apparent when the old roofs were demolished added to the workload and timeline. Expansion of work to include other areas not originally included in the project bids, and decreases in the workforce of contracted companies and the weather-related issues delayed our progress. And Mr. Gillette did an excellent report about that this evening for operations. So our efforts, when aligning with the reasons for the... I'm sorry. These things happen every year without obstacles, but with the pandemic, expectations are not always able to be met with the same fervent effort while aligning with the reasons for these delays. So our referendum passed in December, but the pandemic, that was before the pandemic, and now the bids were delayed due to the pandemic, and still our professional told us that we could complete the work in the summer. But just like each of us were asked to shut down for the pandemic, so did some of the items for our repairs and upgrades. This is not an excuse, it's the reality we are living through. Having been a teacher in this district for 23 years, I was asked by the HEA president to be considering putting my name forward to be a candidate for the Board of Ed in 2017. After careful considerations, an opportunity to serve the community that I had lived in for over 30 years just seemed a great way to still serve the students and parents in our community, as well as stay in touch with teachers. So I submitted my paperwork, and here I am. What has been a difficult and challenging few years of serving on the board has also had its moments of wonderful highlights, interacting with students and parents and observing the accomplishments of teachers while working alongside the administration to try and make improvements. What has disappointed me is the lack of faith and community trust that has been carefully cultivated by the HEA. You see, I wrongfully assumed and looked forward to more collaborative effort to make our community the best it can be. It should not be an us against them mentality. There's already too much of that in the world today. As board members, we must look at issues and problems through a prism of light. For we are elected to represent the community as a whole, not just one ray in the spectrum of the light. So the taxpayers, students, their parents, the residents without children in the district, even small businesses and municipal workers, as well as the teachers, all become part of that spectrum. I think my 3 minutes must be getting close, so I'll try to cut it short. The many hundreds of hours spent for our district on formulating the back-to-school plan with administration and over 50 community health and safety experts, including administrators, child study team members, union representatives, 4 of our 9 board members, our contractors, Sodexo and Catholic Charities, in addition to inviting the Township Department of Health. All of these stakeholders in the community met and planned for many hours over several weeks. In many cases, the plan they formulated far exceeds the requirements and guidelines of the state. and the New Jersey Department of Education. Although I didn't work directly on that committee, the plans were reviewed and modified as discussed in our Education and Operations Committees, as well as the Human Resource Committee. This board as a whole has been focused on students who need to return to the classroom for their social and emotional well-being, for the students who find virtual learning difficult, for the parents who must be working now, for the teachers who want to return to teaching in the classroom, and there are many. It's important for the community to understand that according to the Disease Control Center, wearing a mask and social distancing will protect against transmission of this coronavirus. The Hillsborough plan calls for both. With that said, exceptional care needs to be taken in the messages that others parrot on social media. The community as a whole is a part of this plan, and while no plan is foolproof to ensure what the future holds in store for any of us, we on the board collaborate so that we can make the safest and most well-planned actions that will guide us forward. Remembering that we are all in this together, and cooperatively, together we will succeed in hopefully safely, resuming our educational goals for the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Mr. Gillette.
Thank you. I have two quick things. Thank you, Dr. Harris, by the way. I actually took my headphones off to listen to that because I'm sitting right next to Dr. Harris, and I wanted to hear her without the computers, and it was really good. So I had two quick things. One member of the public today we heard from mentioned 20-minute snack time. Now, I was in the DRC meetings, and as I recall, we did discuss the possibility of snack, but it was my recollection that the state said masks could not be removed in school at all, and consequently, there would be no snack. So can you clarify that, Dr. Tunis?
Yes, they didn't say that. Then they said that. Then they pulled back on that and said that students may have snack. It could be staggered so that all the masks are not off at once. It could also be done outside. And I know that that's what some of the teachers are actually currently doing. I witnessed it in a couple classrooms.
All right, because I think we also may have received an email today from a concerned parent. So I don't think there's uniformity. Is that left to the principals to decide what to do in their own building, or are you going to come out with a plan for that?
Yes, Dr. Felcher and I talked about that earlier today when we got that email.
Okay, so you're going to come. You may have a uniform plan for the elementary schools, at least, I would say, right? Okay. Yes. The second thing is just also real quick. Mr. Oliver and Mrs. Maroon mentioned very eloquently, I think, mentioned that kids wanting to come back to school, and I just wanted to reiterate what I said a week ago at our last meeting, that there are those students that want to come back, but I believe we have a considerable number of students in Hillsborough that need to come back for various reasons, and not just want. These students need to be in school for a variety of reasons. They just cannot. There's going to be students that fall through the cracks here, from our smallest students up to high school students, that for whatever reason they need that in-person learning. They need the social aspect of it for their mental health. I don't want to get into the things, but you can imagine. So it's not just want; it's really need. But I agree with the sentiment of the other board members that it has to be done safely. So let's work towards making it safely. I think we can all agree on that. So let's try to do that. Let's try to make a plan, and let's try to have it done soon and safe. I don't know, is that such a thing? Maybe I just made that up. Soon and safe? I don't think that'll catch on. I'll keep working on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gillette. I'll just make a couple of closing comments. It looks like the board has exhausted their comment session. I think it's important to note that many kids want to be back and many parents want their kids back, but and I think the reason why we haven't discussed that here is because kids may want a lot of things that may not be good for them. So while it's important to note that it's important for kids to be back in school, regardless of whether or not they want to be there, in-person learning is the best we can do, and we know this. It's our responsibility as a district to ensure that the plan that ensures their safety is executed appropriately. And, I think there's a lot of discussion about air quality and ventilation and all of these things in order to reduce the spread. But the best thing that we can do is to not introduce the virus into our classroom. And in order to do that, as I think Ms. Gordon said, we need people to take personal responsibility. We know kids can be asymptomatic. We do know that. But we also know that if you wear a mask, you're protecting, and you're keeping your distance, you're protecting other people. We know that in the past, parents have sent children to school by giving them Advil and sending them on their way, sending them with various symptoms that they knew were going to come back. And they were going to get a phone call, but hey, if I could push it off until noon, which right now we're only having half days, why not? Well, here's why not. You're endangering every single person in the school by doing that. You're endangering everybody from the other children on the bus to the bus drivers, to the other students in the class, to the teachers, to the custodians who have to clean up. And so I really think it's important for us to continue to impress upon everybody the importance of taking absolute responsibility. Your children can join a virtual classroom if they don't feel well. Likewise, staff are being told to stay home. There is a COVID form that I get at least 4 of them every day from different buildings, but I don't get every building, which was a question I was going to ask. I'm sure they're all doing them. I just don't think the Board of Ed gets all of them. That is asking, staff to ensure that they are not symptomatic. And at the end, if you answer no to the wrong questions, you're told, please do not come in. Parents will have those same things to fill out next week. For those parents who have opted for hybrid learning. On those days that their children are supposed to be in school, they will have to fill it out. If they don't fill it out, their children will be sequestered until such time that they do fill it out. It is absolutely incredible to note that the virus will not just appear in our schools miraculously. It will only appear if it is introduced through a human host or a cat, but we don't have cats in the school. So I think we're safe there. I do think that we all have to work together to ensure that when we return to schools, which we are doing next week with our hybrid learners, and we have already done with our most vulnerable learners, that we do everything we can as individuals to ensure the safety of our community. With that being said, I am incredibly sympathetic to the plight of the Department of Health in our town. They are being asked to do nearly the impossible, and they are being, when they try to contact trace, they are not being given honest answers, and they're understaffed. So I myself contacted them today and asked how I could help, and I'm waiting to hear about training opportunities to become a contact tracer so that I can volunteer my time. I would encourage the community to do that as well, to try to look to be a solution and not part of the problem. So with that, I think we can turn to the action agenda. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Swasson. The superintendent recommends that the Board of Education approve the education agenda as follows: 9.1 to 9.4, motion to approve travel-related expenses, motion to approve revised curriculum, motion to approve new curriculum, and motion to approve policies for the first reading: 2431.3, heat participation policy for student athlete safety, and 5320, immunization.
Thank you, Dr. Antunes. Do I have a motion to approve the education agenda items 9.1.9 to 9.4?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Haas. Second. Thank you, Dr. Harris. Roll call, please, Mr. Mahmood.
Surely, Mr. Gillette?
Yes.
Mrs. Haas?
Yes.
Dr. Harris?
Yes.
Mrs. Maroon?
Yes.
Mr. Oliver,
Yes.
Mr. Pulsifer,
Yes.
Mrs. Stats,
Yes.
Ms. Trujillo,
Yes.
and Dr. Susan.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
The superintendent recommends that the Board of Education approve the human resources agenda as follows, 10.1 to 10.9. Motion to approve the resolution to create a position of the support desk technician. Motion to approve retirements and resignations. And I'd like to point out that our custodian from Amsterdam, Helena Ludwig, has provided 20 years of service to Amsterdam or to the district. Motion to approve revised leaves of absences as listed and approved leaves of absence as listed. Motion to approve appointments and also to approve unaffiliated administrator salaries as listed. Motion to approve mentors and buddies and 6th and 7th period coverages, as well as the recension of 1 6th period coverage.
Thank you, Dr. Antunes. May I have a motion to approve items 10.1 through 10.8?
9.
Thank you. 9.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Haas. Mr. Pulsifer?
Yes, could we separate item 10.5, please?
Yes, thank you. I need that separated as well. Okay, anything else? Okay, so we are now voting to approve items 10.1 to 10.9 with the exception of 10.5. Roll call, please, Mr. Mahmood.
Surely, Mr. Gillette,
Yes.
Mrs. Haas,
Yes.
Dr. Harris,
Yes.
Mrs. Maroon,
Yes.
Mr. Oliver,
Yes.
Mr. Pulsifer,
Yes.
Mrs. Stats,
Yes.
Ms. Trujillo,
Yes.
Dr. Susan.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. May I have a motion to approve item 10.5, the appointments this evening?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Haas. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Stats. May I have a roll call, please, Mr. Mahmood?
Surely, Mr. Gillette,
Yes.
Mrs. Haas,
Yes.
Dr. Harris,
Yes.
Mrs. Maroon,
Yes.
Mr. Oliver,
Yes.
Mr. Pulsifer.
Abstain.
Thank you, Mrs. Stats,
Yes.
Ms. Trujillo,
Yes.
and Dr. Susan.
I too have to abstain.
Motion passes.
Thank you. I do want to note that we are hiring a nurse this evening, so that is one position down. We're all very happy to welcome Mrs. Buchan. Okay, next, operations.
The superintendent recommends that the Board of Education approve the operations agenda as follows, 11.1 to 11.4. Motion to approve the monthly financials as well as the monthly bills. Motion to approve the deposit into maintenance reserve and capital reserve accounts. And motion to approve an out-of-district placement.
Do I have a motion to approve those items as listed?
So moved.
Second. Second. Thank you, Mrs. Stats. Roll call, please, Ms. Mahmood.
Mr. Gillette,
I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, you didn't ask for discussion, but I'll make it real quick. So people might be worrying about the odd amounts in the deposits, and I say for the capital reserve account, it's just, well, let's put it this way: we had a certain amount of money that we could in excess surplus that we could deposit into these accounts. We started with the maintenance reserve. Maintenance reserve account, we cannot deposit more money into that account than we would reasonably be expected to spend during the year on maintenance. So that number gets subtracted first from the total excess surplus, and that's the $854,000. The remainder of that goes into capital reserve. The good thing about the maintenance reserve is it's during the course of the year, it's not necessarily restricted to maintenance. So it worked out well for us last year to do that. So it's going to work out well again. Now you can start the roll call if you want.
Thank you. Sorry for not asking.
No, that's all right. I just wanted to make sure the board members understood.
Yeah, I didn't see anything. Hands. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So Mr. Gillette, I'm assuming you're a yes?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Haas?
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Harris?
Yes.
Mrs. Marie,
Yes.
Mr. Oliver,
Yes.
Mr. Pulsifer,
Yes.
Mrs. Stat,
Yes.
Ms. Trujillo,
Yes.
and Dr. Fasson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have some informational items. I will open the floor to board comment again before we move to adjourn. Mr. Gillette.
I just wanted to apologize to people, board members and people maybe watching this, whatever, that I touched my mask a lot tonight, maybe like 100 times. I didn't touch it at all because I ran back to the car right before the meeting started because I'd forgotten my mask. And I grabbed a new mask that I'd never worn before, and it just doesn't fit right. It's coming down. So I mean, you're not supposed to. We're all separate here. We have our sanitizer. It's not going to matter. But if you saw me doing that a lot, kids, don't do what I was doing. All right, that's all. Thank you.
Hence the importance of making sure that you have purchased a mask that fits your face and you're comfortable wearing it for several hours. So thank you for demonstrating that, Mr. Gillette. And I should reinforce, I'm sure there'll be videos coming out in the next few days from different principals. I watched the one from Dr. Trabulski today where he encourages everybody to bring several masks. I don't know that he said well-fitting, but they should, in fact, be well-fitting and comfortable. And again, multiples of them. Thank you, Mrs. Stats.
And just to piggyback on what Mr. Gillette said, and also maybe it's a good idea to make sure ahead of time, you know, maybe wear it for a few hours before your first day in school.
Right, just like you practice going up to the bus stop and getting on the bus. I used to do that with my kids every year. Get them out of bed and go.
I practiced being on the Board of Ed before I was on the Board of Ed.
Did that? Well, I won't say what I was going to say.
Really?
Okay. Do I have anybody else or motion to adjourn?
Wait.
Sorry, we're going back to executive session. I was really hoping to get home, but yes, we have to go back into executive session. So I'll make that again. Whereas the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231 of the laws of 1975 provides that a public body may exclude the public from that portion of a meeting of which the body discusses certain public matters for which confidentiality is required as permitted in Section 7B of the Act. Resolved by the Board of Education of the Township of Hillsborough in the County of Somerset in the State of New Jersey as follows. The matters to be discussed are the superintendent's evaluation, and the matters discussed in executive session shall be disclosed to the public when the need for confidentiality no longer exists. I should say that we will not be taking action at the end of that, so we will adjourn from executive session. May I have a motion to move into executive session?
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstain? Not seeing any. Thank you. We are in executive session and will not return this evening.